Okay, in this discussion, we will be proceeding to the next part of solving for the empirical formula. Next part, that means we level up with our computations. We follow the same steps, but a little bit modified due to some differences in the answers. Again, before we begin solving for empirical formula, please make sure that your calculator and your periodic table are ready for this problem solving. So let's go ahead and read our problem. A compound is determined to contain, underline your given, 5.31 grams of chlorine and 8.40 grams of oxygen. What is the compound's empirical formula? So the first column is asking you for the element. And now let's go back to the problem. What are these elements? We have chlorine and oxygen. So two elements, when we put it on the chart, the element has to be in its symbolic form. Chlorine is the first element mentioned, and chlorine has a symbol Cl, so you should write Cl there. The second element is oxygen, so therefore we have to write the symbol of oxygen there, which is O. So that is for the portion of the element. The second column is the mass. This is completely different from the previous example because the previous example was asking for the percentage. However, this time, there's no more percentage, but it goes right away to the mass. Why? Because the given is not in its percent format. So therefore, we don't need the percent. The given actually gives us the mass right away because of the unit grams. So therefore, this is direct to the point. Whatever is the mass for chlorine there, that's what we will place here, which is 5.31 grams. So all we need to do is just put the 5.31 grams there. And similarly, we do the same for oxygen, which is 8.40 grams. So we don't need to have the percentage. We can go right away to the mass if ever the problem gives the mass right away. How do you know? By looking at the unit of the numbers. So if it's grams already, that means the chart will give you the mass right away. So the next step will be the mole. Mole, again, the formula is mass divided by molar mass of the element. Molar mass of the element will always come from the periodic table. You refer to your periodic table of the elements for the molar mass of your element. So let's go ahead and write our solution first. Mass divided by molar mass. So the mass is 5.31 grams divided by molar mass of chlorine on the periodic table. So periodic table, chlorine is here, and that's 35.45. So that is our chlorine, 35.45. And because it's molar mass, the unit is grams per mole. And you put the equal sign there. Similarly, we do the same. Write the solution for oxygen. Mass is 8.40 grams. And divided by the molar mass of oxygen on the periodic table is 15.999, which we can round it up to 16. So we will use the 16.00 grams per mole. And you put equal sign there. Before you do any calculation in the calculator, please cancel the units that should be canceled out. So in this case, when we divide mass over molar mass, the gram unit gets to cancel out. That's why we're left with mole. And once we've canceled that out, we're ready to do the calculation on the calculator. So 5.31 divided by 35.45, and that will give us a lot of answers, but we said we're going to pick the first two decimal places. So that's 0.14, but the 4 is followed by a 9, so that's going to become 0.15 mole. Okay? 0.15. The second one, that's 8.40 divided by 16. That's going to be 0.525, in which if we pick the first two decimal places, the 2 will become a 3 because it's followed by a 5. So that's going to become a 0.53 mole. So let me just box the final mole answers to emphasize them because we're going to need it to the next column. So now we are done getting the mole answers for every element. We're going to go to the next step. It says divide by the smallest mole. So to do this step, the very safe thing you can do first is you copy the answer first. Copy the answer from the previous column. So that's 0.15 mole. And the second one is 0.53 mole. Then it says divide. So you put that division sign. Divide by the smallest mole. So which is the smaller mole from the answer? 0.15 or 0.53? Obviously, the smaller value is the 0.15. So that's what we will divide to every answer, in which the first one will be divided to itself. And the second one will also be divided by 0.15 mole. So that's equals. And you know that mole over mole, the unit there gets to cancel out. Therefore, we don't have unit anymore for this particular step. So 0.15 over 0.15 will give us a 1 because it's by itself. And we'll have 0.53 divided by 0.15. That will be equal to around 3.53. So let me write that down. I'll just put the answer here below. That's 3.53. Now, this is not a whole number. This is a whole number. So how do we reconcile the next step? The next step, it says that skip this if it's already a whole number. Now, if only one is a whole number and the other one is not, that means you cannot skip both. Okay, so that means you're going to make them a whole number, especially this one here. So how do we make a 3.53 a whole number? So this is the case on how to make it a whole number. You think of the least number that you can multiply to 3.53 to make it closer to a whole number. Think of that least number that you can multiply to a 3.53 to make it close to a whole number. To make it easy, a 3.53, because this is common in empirical formula, take it like a 0.5. And a 0.5 is half of a 1, right? A 0.5. To make a 0.5 a 1, you usually multiply it by 2. So every time you have an answer that is a 0.5, anything that's a 0.5, always multiply it to a 2 to make it close to a whole number. So this is how it's going to look like now. The 3.53, when we multiply it by 2, this will become, so 3.53 multiplied by 2, that's 7.06. And 7.06 is very close to a whole number 7. So therefore, this is acceptable. So 3.53, we're now making it a whole by multiplying it by 2. And whatever we do to this number, you have to be fair and square and do it the same way to the previous number as well. So the 1 here will have to be multiplied to whatever is your multiplier here and get its new product. So 1 times 2 becomes a 2, and of course this one is now a 7. So therefore, our simplest whole number ratio will now be your 2 and your 7. And that leads us to the final answer here, that 2 will be the subscript of CL, so that will become a CL subscript 2, and O will have a subscript of 7. So O becomes a 7.